The tale of Urashima Taro is a Japanese story about a young fisherman who, after saving a sea turtle being tormented by some kids, is rewarded by said turtle by being taken to the palace of the Dragon King, the Ryugyujo, deep beneath the sea. Welcomed by the palace's Princess Otohime, he spends the next couple of days partying and feasting with all the other people of the sea, but soon grows homesick and worries about the well-being of his mother. Informing the princess he wished to return to the surface, Otohime reluctantly complied and gave him a box, the tama-tobacco, and warned him to never open it. Upon returning to the surface, Taro was met by scenery he had never seen before and a place he was unfamiliar with. His home, along with his mother and everyone he ever knew, was gone. Confused about where he found himself, he asked the people around if they'd ever heard of a man by the name of Urashima Taro, with responses that vaguely recalled hearing tales about a guy with that same name that dove into the sea and never returned. This is when Taro finds out that around 300 years had passed while he spent a couple of days beneath the sea. Overcome with the grief of losing everything, he opens the tama-tobacco, and in an instant he rapidly ages, for what was in that box all this time was his old age. Taro, a seemingly normal person, is left in a foreign world with nothing, nobody, and is in a state where he's at his weakest. This short story would mark the very first Isekai. Media, more than anything, has always served to tell you some kind of story first and foremost, with its ability to take us to different worlds, letting us experience all sorts of emotions and thoughts through books, movies, and games, and when done well, completely immerses you in experiences you'd never be able to get in real life. And in comes Isekai, a genre that literally puts you in the shoes of someone else, giving you first-hand experience of their journey through a world completely different to ours. It's the next best thing to actually being transported to a fantasy world, considering there is no way you'd give up all the modern conveniences we have, like toilets. I feel like I've described Isekai a lot in my previous videos, but for those tuning in for the first time or are unfamiliar, the term Isekai literally means another world. A character from our world finds themselves being transported, summoned, or reincarnated to a world vastly different from ours, filled with all sorts of fancy elements like magic, dragons, elves, and video game status screens for some reason. It's a genre that really started gaining more traction in the 2010s following the explosions of a few titles that I'll be mentioning later. It's interesting to see how one or two IPs can literally cause a spark that makes a whole genre take off seemingly overnight. Now you can find isekai stories of just about anyone or anything. It's truly one of the most versatile genres Japan has produced. During its early years, before it even got the name isekai, it was a genre that was occupied with a lot of mecha stories. Aura Battler Divine, Vision of Escaflowne, Magic Knight Rayarth, just to name a few. These stories were rich in expansive high fantasy worlds that often got political, presenting you with settings that immersed you in their grand scales in a way modern isekai hasn't really been able to replicate anymore. What was a genre that brought a lot of unique experiences has homogenized into something that now becomes associated with slop. Modern isekai, more than anything, now seems more interested in selling you an escapist fantasy gimmick first, before pushing a story that more often than not is painfully mediocre, squandering the gimmick it tried so hard to sell you in the first place. From being reincarnated as an animal, to a monster, to a vending machine. Yeah, because of its money-making potential, trope familiarity, and how safe it is, isekai today has become a genre that has seen an overabundance of slop that just barely passes as a story. However, it wasn't always like this. Believe it or not, modern isekai has its roots in fanfiction of all things. We all know a series of tropes comes together to form a genre, but isekai is unique in the fact that it started out as one of the most contentious forms of online literature, fanfiction, specifically Familiar Zero fanfiction. Now, pay close attention. During the advent of Japan's cell phone novel boom, people needed a place to post these stories, and as a result, several sites were launched, but none as important as our focus for today, Shosetsuka ni Naro, or shosetsu.com. The site started out as a place for people to post their amateur writing and supported literature of all kinds, from blog posts to journals, etc., but they were not prepared for the storm that was about to take over their site in the form of the Familiar of Zero fanfiction. This site, plus the release of this series, was the perfect storm that gave birth to a plethora of works that spawned more works, which in turn spawned more. It was crazy and created what we know today as Naroke, or the proto-isekai genre. So many of the isekai tropes we know and love today come from these fanfictions, to the point that if you look really carefully, You'll see references in anime like ReZero, but the amount of fanfiction was so much it began overshadowing the other pieces of literature on the site, and the creators said to themselves, well, I'm not trying to make the next archive of our own, and so fanfiction was banned. Writers who had made a name for themselves with fanfiction didn't want to leave the site and lose their followers, so they turned their hands towards writing original stories with these tropes they loved so much. Stories like Mushoku Tensei and others were born from the Naruto movement. And the rest, as they say, is history. As you know, these tropes continued to grow and evolve until they became the standard genre of isekai. We have Tensei, reincarnation, Tenni, transmigration, Shokan, summoning, and Naru, OP protagonist or protagonist that gets OP. You might be saying to yourself, but Bread, what does one of the least funny and rapidly declining in quality genres have to do with individualism in a collective society like Japan? Well, cool your ovens, I'm getting there. But before I do, it's important we get a grasp on what individualism actually is. Individualism is an ideology that places primacy, autonomy, and value in the individual distinct from the collective. That collective could be society, tradition, hell, your Discord group, whatever it is, it places emphasis on you and your goals and desires. It makes you, the individual, the fundamental unit of meaning, moral worth, and creative expression. Every person has the right to make their own choices, are responsible for defining and pursuing their own values, and derive meaning from whatever they deem fit. It's a stark contrast to collectivism, which sees human identity and values grounded in belonging to a society or a tradition. Japanese society has a reputation that precedes it. I'm sure you've seen all those thing Japan reels around. You know, neat streets, quiet respectful people, and tidy order tucked into a neat little package. But such social cohesion comes at a hefty price that punishes any kind of deviation. Such a repressed society can only give birth to the ultimate form of escapism, traveling to another world with a clean slate. For example, take the after-work drinking sessions you usually see in a few anime and even Japanese dramas. It can appear sweet on the surface until you closely examine the reality of it. What started out as a friendly after-work invitation morphed into an after-work ritual that can make or break your career. If you decided not to partake without a good reason, your company loyalty is often questioned. Not to mention, these drinks were neither cheap nor free. It's a mandatory expense framed as a team-building experience. A community tax, if you will. Through my research, I found out that Japanese people have a lot of these hidden social taxes, and it's an incredibly high standard to hold oneself to. So how does this relate to modern isekai? Well, let's dive into the genre and see. Almost every isekai follows the same formula. Step 1, have a main character who, in our world, was either a nobody-shutting loser with no achievements whatsoever, or a background character whose favorite hobby was breathing. Step 2, send them to another world, either through summoning or death, where they quickly discover they have some insane stat, ability, or skill that lets them trivialize every single challenge they come across. Step 3, have them have a goal that deviates from the traditional hero's journey, with them quickly acquiring a harem of multicolored women, must include one elf and one cat girl. Step 4, profits. And while good isekai does have some measure of individualism in them, they end up holding up a lot of collectivist values. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. Media is often a way for creatives to express their ideals, and a lot of these Japanese authors are, well, part of Japanese society and have to uphold said values. Their works reflect the world they live in, and that's true for any country really. I mean, just look at Oda's choice to work up to 20 hours a day as one of the highest paid mangaka of our generation. An individualist will say he's famous because of his talents and should therefore be treated accordingly. But collectivism says no, your talent is how you pay back to your community, therefore it's your duty to keep producing good work. Do you see where I'm going with this? These ideals are reflected in a lot of standard shonen. Naruto wants to become the Hokage, the Oga at the top of his village that shunned him most of his life, but as he goes through the story, he realizes that his tether to other people also means he has a duty to them. Conversely, we're introduced to other characters like Sakumo Hatake, who are punished for acting against the village's, the collective's, best interest. Same thing in Mob Psycho 100, where Reagan teaches Mob that his psychic abilities are just like people who are born taller or run faster. His gifts don't make him better than anyone else, and he shouldn't see himself as odd or special for it. A wholesome message to be sure, but through the lens of social cohesion and collectivism, he says these gifts shouldn't stop you from positively contributing to the community. Spy Family has a man adopting a random kid and creating a fake family for his job. Of course, he later grows to care for them deeply, but it's framed for the collective, for the greater good. The higher ups need him to get a wife and a kid, so he does, and that is the premise of the anime. Even Gojo, the honored one himself, is not free from this, as the elders of Jujutsu Society believe that his powers are a tool for the execution of their will, and this is what drives Geto down the path he takes. Gojo becomes an enemy when he becomes unfilial, when he says no to both Yuta and Itadori's execution. So when Gojo is sealed, the elders waste no time trying to carry out their will for the quote of the greater good, by turning to sorcerers who they knew would respect that filial piety to carry out said will. Even Kusakabe remarks that he would have killed Itadori the moment he ate that finger. This illustrates a lack of belief in Itadori's individual abilities to counter Sukuna's control in the grand scheme of things. Itadori being Sukuna's natural counter does not matter, even if he's 1 in a million. Conversely, when Gojo steps on ants, he doesn't kill them. Story-wise, you could say it's because of his curse technique was active, but narratively, I believe it's because Gojo respects the individual down to its smallest unit, which is unfortunate because it ended up being used against him in the Shibuya incident. The themes of traditional shonen are clear. It's a battle between individualist and collectivist ideals. Oftentimes, they fight to protect the status quo. And as such, the typical shonen protagonist embodies the Japanese ideal of gaman, enduring quietly even though you're suffering, giving your all for the collective. And you might be saying, Isekai and shonen share a lot of tropes, so what makes Isekai so different? Unlike shonen protagonists, who are people who initially start out as nothing but desire to do good and never give up, the typical Isekai protagonist is a loser. They're the undesirables of Japanese society, the people who can't make it by being a cog in the machine or simply exist to be bullied or disregarded. While Isekai is seeing an uptick in female protagonists which have made a space for themselves in the villainess subgenre, a way to break from Japanese feminine ideals, most of these losers are guys because they are held to a certain standard. While the perfect female archetype for the Japanese woman is the Yamato Nadeshiko, for men it's a little more dynamic. Enter the Japanese salaryman, an ideal that can be traced all the way back to the Showa era, aptly named the Showa man, a hardworking provider who makes time for his wife, kids, friends, and still puts in extra time at the office and is completely dependable and still goes out for late night drinks with the office crew. Now that is one hell of a standard. The Showa man keeps a stiff upper lip and doesn't complain about these seemingly impossible standards. Until now, this is the image the average Japanese office worker is supposed to live up to. We've already seen the kid equivalent in the Genki boy, always cheerful, positive, and willing to help his friends out at no cost. Both of these archetypes are persons existing for the collective. Self-care or time for oneself do not exist in their dictionary. Isekai is crazy in the way that once they can't fulfill the obligations in the real world, they are now pressured to fulfill them in the next world. And so Isekai, both peak and slop alike, all inherently have the theme of individualism baked into their very cores. A lot of Isekai, mostly bad, are about the self and about reclaiming your autonomy when you're expected to just keel over and die. The sentiment is that if you can't be meaningful to society in any useful way right now, you should actually just off yourself. However, loser protagonists don't agree to that. In this new world, the weakest are secretly the strongest thanks to their unique skills, and they end up becoming stronger not for the sake of the collective, but for their own sake. They go about the world however they please, and any threat to them is one that tries to harm their individualism. It's a genre that doesn't really follow the traditional hero's journey, despite how most of them are about people being summoned to be heroes that will defeat the demon lord. Upon arriving in this new world, they end up just doing their own thing, going against what this new society expects from them, forcing whatever plot was there to morph to their actions. In most modern isekai, the world does not exist until the main character arrives. Whatever politics or world building that had existed prior to their arrival only feels like flavor text and is never delved into deeper unless the protagonist specifically has interest in them. It does a huge disservice to the fantasy genre that is known for being immersive and well thought out. In the case of isekai, it's only really a fantasy just so we can see someone from our world use a sword and cast magic. These worlds do not exist to immerse you, the audience, but instead acts as a sandbox for the main character to do whatever they want in. A main character who is designed to be as bland as possible for you to impose yourself into. And that's one of the main selling points behind isekai: escapism. I'm sure a lot of you watching are from parts of the world that aren't Japan. I know this because my analytics tell me exactly where you guys are, and it also tells me just how many of you are subscribed too, so psst, subscribe. So you may find it hard relating to a lot of these boring, lifeless, vapid, mind-numbing caricatures they call main characters, and you also don't see why anyone would find interest in them, and that is because you're used to seeing stories that focus on someone else's journey, their life, their struggles, their victories, their relationships, their story. Isekai, on the other hand, gives you your story. You're the one who's been summoned to another world. You're the one with the overpowered stats and skills. You're the one with the elf waifu. It makes you the center of the world and showers you with praise. It's why a lot of them, which to remind you existed as light novels first, are written in first person to put you front and center in everything that's happening. These stories are written for the very tired Japanese salaryman in the middle of his 2-hour commute to work at 6 AM in the morning, whose only source of entertainment is his phone, and the Japanese youth who feel like they don't quite fit into the mold of what is expected of their society. It's why we have isekai like Parallel World Pharmacy, I've been killing slimes for 300 years, and Farming Life in Another World. These are all stories that deal with a main character who dies from overwork at their toxic office job, only to reincarnate into another world and choose to take life slow. It's quite interesting seeing the difference in how isekai geared towards older people take more slice of life approaches, while the ones targeted towards younger people are more adventurous in their stories. But no matter what approach they take, they all carry this theme of individualism to some degree, and I think that's pretty cool. It's just a shame that a lot of them aren't all that good, which has caused the genre as a whole to be seen as nothing but slop. Still, that doesn't stop people from enjoying them. Hell, look at me on Failure Frame, the isekai that spurred me into making this very video. That and all the positive words from you guys. What started out as me going into this anime with the pure intention of ripping it apart, ended in me genuinely being invested in it despite all its flaws. I'm not going to delve too deep into it as I already did in that video, which you should totally check out after this, but as someone who has lived a pretty peaceful life with very little friction that would spur me to seek revenge against those who had wronged me, and just being generally lazy, I found myself gripped by Mimori's resolve to punish the goddess who had put him in this awful situation. I found myself rationalizing his actions and telling myself I would have done the same. The thrill of seeking revenge was what hooked me. Not the lore or the characters, but the sensation it gave me. I started to imagine what manner of passive-aggressive attitude I'd give to the teachers of my primary school who had punished me for one mundane reason or the other. Okay, story time. One time I was punished for walking in between two teachers who were having a conversation right in the middle of the hallway and gave no space at the side to pass. And Kid Me was in a hurry to return to class, so the moment I passed through them, I was held back and forced to do this punishment we call riding a bike, which is where you squat and stretch your arms out, putting intense focus on your core. I was there for what felt like almost an hour, and after I was released and returned to class, I was punished again! I held that moment in my chest up until this very day, so imagine if I had seen Failure Frame as a kid back then. I don't think I would be the same Bread you all know. My example just goes to show how easy it is to fall into the trap that is isekai. You may see yourself as immune to its propaganda, but keep in mind that you are in the minority. Isekai, much like YouTube Kids Brain Rot, is more interested in selling you a sensation rather than a literary experience. It's why the main character is so overpowered and glazed. It's why they keep doing tricks on it. It's why the side characters never have some kind of backstory, and it's why most MCs never express any real desires to return to their world. Because if they did, that would break the immersion. Now, while modern isekai has become a genre flooded with trash, we do have some few gems that have been able to break out of the stereotype while still playing into the genre's conventions, as well as properly conveying that theme of individualism. At the top of my head, we have series like ReZero, Mushoku Tensei, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, Overlord, hell, even fucking Kamikatsu are all stories that are able to give good narratives, mostly because they are more focused on the plot and the characters and do their best to flesh out their worlds, rather than trying to sell you a sensation. Some of them still make use of the tropes you'd expect, and some of them have parts of themselves that are hard to like, but in general, they're all just around better than their contemporaries. I see isekai as a genre that still has a lot of potential hiding beneath the surface. A lot of new stuff that comes out really has some great ideas behind them, and you can tell authors are trying their best to innovate on the genre. It's a shame that they just lack the skills to execute them properly. So next time you see an isekai announced and you wonder who it's for, now you know. Though low-key, I'm still not convinced there isn't some kind of money laundering scheme going on. And that'll be it for this video. There are some other stuff regarding the topic I wanted to talk about, but found it hard finding the right place to put them into and would still have the video flow pretty well, so I will be putting all those jumbled up thoughts in a separate video that will be up on Patreon in the next couple of days. If you do decide to support me over there, thank you, and as always, this has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.